Hello and welcome to another edition or update of Connecting Consciousness. It's really lovely to be back and having a chance to communicate with you. Been very busy. I'm sure you've all been really busy as well. Been a great deal going on. So what I want to do is, as we usually do, just give you some updates, tell you what's happening, both with Connecting Consciousness and perhaps with the wider world. And then we'll go into the questions. Generally, as you may know, I don't go through the questions, or Becky doesn't tip me off beforehand. But sometimes she says to me, what are you going to talk about, this week or this week, month? And I'll say, I probably don't know till the moment I put the camera on. But I guess I'll talk about this, this and this. And then if there's been a lot of questions, she'll say to me, yeah, well, there's quite a few questions on this topic or that topic. And we've got quite a few on a particular subject, and I was going to do that as an update, but that would mean that I wouldn't take the questions, and that's a shame. So rather than give it as an update, I'll wait till that particular question or questions come up, and then I'll do that. And that's actually not a bad thing, because there's some very naughty people out there who listen to my updates and then turn me off. I've heard the updates, that's it. So perhaps this is a way of making you stay right through for the show. Right, so thanks very much indeed. Here we go. First of all, I want to thank everybody who has donated to the action against the BBC. I will be writing to each one of you individually, but that's going to take me a little bit of time. So first of all, I'm just recognising what you've all done. Thank you. And then I will get round to it and write you a quick email to thank you. We've nearly hit the target. It hasn't stopped us because we've got the money coming in. The lawyer's prepared to do the work. So I don't want you to think that we're still standing still. We're not. I can tell you that a letter has been sent to the BBC. That's probably all I am legally allowed to say to you. But I can tell you that action has started, and that we're nearly there with the amount of money that we need. So I'm very grateful. Thank you. If we are successful, even if we're not, it will be the first time, to my knowledge, that somebody from a spiritual community has actually taken on the great juggernaut of the mouthpiece for the establishment, in this case the BBC. So the very first time that somebody has, from our community, been prepared to have a go. That noise in the background is the white cat, who's very cross that I am not talking to the cat. Hold on a minute. What you doing? Come here. Come on. Come here. Come here. Wow, I want to say hello. So here's the white cat. It's not a very well cat. It's my very special cat, and it actually has to have an insulin injection twice a day. And that means that he's sometimes a little bit cantankerous. That's probably the right word. So you have to forgive him if he's a bit naughty, and we're very forgiving for him. Right, so thank you very much for the donations, and clearly I will be writing to you personally to thank you. And it doesn't matter, whatever you've given is a marker towards this, what might be a unique stand against one of the monoliths of the New Age, in terms of the New Age of the establishment. Right, now then, although it doesn't hugely impact CC members, it has been impacting our coordinators, and those of you who are not a member of CC, well, why not, should be, may perhaps be surprised to learn that we've got representation in over 120 countries. Not all have a coordinator, but many do. And of course there are members in more countries than that. And we have just like any other organization, we have a server which provides the ability to send emails. Now, I'm not technically minded. I'm not hugely technically minded. And I was shocked to learn that the organization that owns the server basically chucked us out. So before I threw my hands up and said it's all an attack, it's another attack, it might be, What they said was that we were, as an organisation, spamming. Now, I don't know what that means in the technical term, but what's happening is that we have some coordinators who have, sending out 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 emails a day, and the main figures that you can get are maybe you're allowed up to maybe 500 an hour or something like that. So we were actually sending more emails than the server was allowing us, and as a result of that, they just turned that all off. See, a coordinator will find an interesting link on YouTube, and then he or she will say, hey guys, have you seen this? And then they will send that out to their membership. Now, if it's the United States, there are thousands of members, or Australia, which is nearly 1,000 members now. So that one link that's emailed out to all our membership in those countries exceeds the number that we're allowed to send out. And I was absolutely shocked that in this day and age, you're limited by the number of emails that you can send out. And I asked, well, how do the big corporations cope? And Andy, who does all the technical stuff for us, thank you, Andy, said that basically what happens is that these use a third party, and then they do a corporate mail out. So Tuesday at 5 o'clock, out goes the corporate mail out. But we're not like that. We're not a corporate. We're a spiritual organization made up of individuals who are not controlled in a hierarchy, in the sense that they're told at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you will do this or you will do that. These are individual men and women who go online and hear a bit of information, do a bit of research, and think, wow, that's really good. My members want to hear that. They're not going to write to me and say, hey, Simon, can I send this out? Because, I trust them. So they send it. And it's been overloading the system, not technically overloading it, but financially overloading it. In other words, they don't like that. So they pull the plug on that. And so we are in the process, and I have to do it tonight, writing a letter to the server owners explaining that we're not a private company spamming, we are a spiritual organization. Explain in detail what's gone wrong, how it's gone wrong, and then they want us to say how we're going to put it right. So, thanks to Andy and to Debs, we've got sort of a plan how we can put it right. Now, there's no guarantee that they'll accept that. They might just say, tough, we're not interested. You're just a voluntary organisation. We don't care. I don't know. And then we'll have to find somebody else. Now, this doesn't really impact the members, except you're not getting mail outs from your coordinators, and I need you to understand, please, that's why. Not because your coordinator has gone to sleep or left or doesn't care. He or she just can't do it. And the other big point is, if you've wanted to join CC, and over the last few days you have filled in the application form, that's been lost. So wait until I make an announcement that we're back in the land of the living, technically wise, and then please resubmit your application. So perhaps it is an attack, because what they've done is they've stopped CC from having any more members electronically. We can't do it, and they've stopped us doing mail outs to the membership. So actually, now I think about it, that's a really effective way of having a go again at a spiritual organization. But they've given us the reason why. Sounds technically legit, and we will respond to it. So that's yet another issue that we have to deal with. So I'll keep you posted on that. We went to visit the monastery in Manchester in England. Had an invite to go and visit to see if we could be collaboratively working, if we could work together. And they have asked me not to go into too much detail at the moment, because they are a going concern and they've got a few things they want to sort out. But I was very impressed with what I saw. I liked the organisation. The ethos is almost identical to Connecting Consciousness. Really, really, really good people running that organisation. And I would be delighted to work with them collaboratively. We've got a lot in common. And so I can't say anything more at the moment, but as we get more towards some form of formal agreement, if that's the way we choose to go, then I'll be able to publicly announce, along with them, what our collaborative arrangements will be. So that was really great, and thank you to the organisers for the monastery in Manchester for showing us around. Fabulous building, much larger than I thought. Very exciting opportunity. Okay, so there we are with that. You can't put the news on now without really being made aware of the situation in America, that although we are still a few weeks away from November the 3rd, you really feel it now. We can feel the attacks against the present administration in America. You can see how the media are trying to do what they're doing, and nearly everything seems to have a thread that leads back to whether one side or the other side wins. So there's a lot I want to talk about: vaccinations, the situation with the possible swap over on the currencies, the underground bases that are being dealt with. But as I understand from Becky, that there's a lot of these questions here. I'm happy to do that. We did have a Skype, Becky and I, with our international coordinators. 20 odd of them managed to make it through, and the Australian group said, well, Simon didn't talk about this, that and the other. Well, we don't have that much time on an international Skype call, but did want to confirm that there are a number of issues for the good guys in Australia, and that just as in America, a force has been sent in, and some of these underground bases, there's one particular one I've got my eye on, not exclusively one, where children have been brought up, and there's a real pattern emerging here where tents are immediately set up around the extraction point. That's what happened in America, and then those that are brought up are immediately treated first aid in the tents. Then the criticality of them is then valued, and then they'll go to different places. And so whilst, and we can talk about this later, whilst absolutely this lockdown is part of a deep state cabal point, in Australia it's actually being used to an advantage to provide cover for the good guys to extricate people from this particular base. And the rumbles that you're hearing in other parts of Australia are detonations in the tunnels that are connecting some of these bases. You see, a lot of these bases don't just have one in and one out, they have several. A bit like in the old days, in the old churches where the priest had a escape route, several escape routes. So if you're not sure where they're going to come out, or if you can find a tunnel, you block it, which stops anyone coming in. It's not to stop people getting out, it's to stop people coming back in and reactivating that facility, or at least hiding out in it. So those rumbles that you're hearing are indeed explosions is perhaps not the right word, but it's implosion is a better word, of some of those facilities, bringing down the rock falls, making those facilities not viable unless you had a lot of heavy earth moving machinery which would be picked up by satellite. So yes, in Australia, this lockdown in parts of Australia are being used for good purposes. So that's one piece of good news that I can give you. All right, let's go on to the questions, and then some of the things I would have updated you, I'm sure we can pick up then. So thank you, Becky.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to add regarding the monastery in Manchester. It's called a monastery. It caters for all faith. They support and have functions for people of every faith.
Thank you. That's a good point, and I didn't mention that. It's built in 1862, and it was literally built by monks. It was a monastery, but then it was changed, and it wasn't part of a religious group. It was, I don't know what the word is, decommissioned. So now although it's called the monastery, and it's officially called the monastery on its leaflets, so that's the right terminology for it, they're not, the people running it are of no particular faith. So, it doesn't matter what your religion is, you're not going to go in there and be confronted by icons of religion. No one's going to try and, sign you up to work in the church. So, although it's called a monastery, Becky's absolutely right. It's a non-religious building dedicated to truth and spirituality, and I was so pleased that they reached out to us. We didn't go to them, they came to us, and said, you seem to be doing what we're doing, although we've got a building, and hey, surely we can sit around the table and we can have a talk. And that's exactly what we did, and I'm very grateful. Right, thank you for that upright. Although I don't want people imagining all these monks walking around the cloisters, humming to themselves. So that's not the case at all. Thank you, Becky. Questions?
Well, not in this dimension anyway.
Well, those people that's a good point. Those people who see, the mad monk. I mean, there's many a paperback book being written about the mad monk. Okay, off we go.
Okay, so starting with questions. Normally I don't look at or read the chat thread which is associated with the group, questions for Simon. But I have just seen one question which I'm going to read out because so many people are experiencing something similar at the moment. So this question is from Sandra in Scotland, who says, I meditate a few times daily and I put protection around me prior to meditating, but something happened a few days ago and it was very different and I'm still a bit shocked by it. In this meditation, it was as if my head was slowly extended by something unseen, pulling it up and backwards. I tried to physically move and I couldn't. I was stuck to the spot. Then all these images came down to my head so fast I couldn't keep up with it. It was so fast and time seemed not to exist, as I thought it happened over a long time, when in fact afterwards I saw it was only about 5 minutes since I started the meditation. I was seeing many shapes, some in ultra-light blue that shone vibrantly, some like a written language of shapes and squiggles, including lots of images just flashing by. I mentally fought to get control of myself, but I couldn't move or stop it. Unexpectedly, it wasn't frightening me, as if I was being kept calm. It wasn't like a movie running fast, but more like old photo slides speeding up by my mind's eye. I have since meditated on this, and I get the word download. What was it? What was happening to me, and why couldn't I control it or stop it happening? And was this something nefarious or something positive?
I'm going to lose all these questions.
Okay.
You're going to have to just do one at a time.
Okay, so what was it?
Right, what was it? Thank you for that. Right across the planet at the moment, this is on the increase. Right back to Babylonian times, this has happened. But we really are seeing a massive increase in this. The new age word, or the spiritual word, is download, because we have a technical culture at the moment, and that fits in really nicely. If I just said to you information was transmitted to you, that would put it across. Colours and shapes, in a way that we in a third dimension don't understand, when fitted together like a jigsaw puzzle, can actually be an encoding which, and I don't fully understand whether it encodes into the DNA or into the soul itself, but at some point is released, unlocked, and then activates. The activation is two types. One is a activation where you have a memory, or you have an activation of what you need to do, or you suddenly become really, really psychically powerful, or it activates and you don't even know it's activated, but you begin to see certain changes. You didn't send me any drawings with it, to my knowledge. What I'd be really keen on is drawings and the right colours for the shapes and the squiggles for the writing. Now, generally speaking, when the download, I don't put the squiggles in. because you've heard the saying, a picture paints 1,000 words. And when fourth dimensional and fifth dimensional entities wish to communicate with you, they'll do it with colour and shapes. The squiggles tend to be when they're referring to a person's name or a particular object, or something that's ritually important and has a title. So the nearest, and I'd be interested if this is correct, the nearest perhaps to the squiggles is Sanskrit. So if you go online and look up Sanskrit and have a look at that, and then tell me, please, whether Sanskrit looks a little bit like what you remember getting. Now, if it does, I know exactly who's communicated with you. I can't know the message, but I'll know exactly who's behind it. So it's information which has been transferred to you, either to be activated tomorrow, the next day, a week, a year, but certainly it's information that has been sent on a cellular or a genetic level. And that's very important. Please, Becky, the other questions that came with it.
Well, mainly, was it something nefarious or something positive?
It was not nefarious. That's positive. Positive in the sense that it's not going to hurt you. But it's only positive if, when it activates, your choice how to use it is for the good of humanity. So we are, all of us, offered opportunities every day of our lives, and most people are unawake and unaware, and they don't recognize that opportunity for what it is, or that sign, and they just walk straight on by. It doesn't mean anything to them. They were given an opportunity, they failed to observe it. Now, that's a very small proportion left of us who observe it. There's an even smaller proportion of that small proportion who decide to act on it. And then there's an even tinier group that act on it in the right way. So it's a filter system. So we get an opportunity, do we recognize it? If we do recognize it, do we act on it? And if we act on it, do we act on it in a way that I would say is service to others rather than service to self? So don't be concerned about this. It's much more common than you think. And maybe give me a shout when you think this begins to unlock and activate for you. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Corrine from Western Australia says, "Hi Simon and Becky, this will be my first podcast as I've just joined as the Western Australia coordinator is a friend.
Oh,
just
good.
wondering if you can clarify what's going on or what's to be expected in Australia between now and the US elections and beyond. The storm is brewing, and any news specifically on our government, Gasara, and the children would be appreciated."
Right, you talked about the children, well done. I've answered that, so I don't need to go through that again. There's a real opportunity for the Australian government to be jolly sight more supportive of its people. You won't have fighting on the streets in Australia, that's not going to happen, but you will have infighting in government as the election approaches and as the election runs through in America. What do I expect to happen? That really depends on who's going to win the presidential election in the US, and the outcomes will be dramatically different depending on who wins and who doesn't win. If President Trump is not elected, then you should expect mandatory vaccinations. However, the military in the United States, the US military, not the intelligence services, but the military, are very, very close to the Australian military, much more than the British are now. And this operation to rescue children is really being done on a military level. So the US military are advising and supporting Australia. But, and this is a bit of a shock for many people, the leader of China is not as bad as we might think. The problem for China is the Chinese Communist Party, and at the moment they're trying to break up into groups or counties or provinces in China. I think that's the better word for China, provinces, where the Communist Party is particularly strong and where it's particularly weak. So you have a situation where the leader of China is not particularly bad, but the people around him are particularly bad. Not all of them, but many of them. And so there is truth that this guy, the leader of China, actually went to Australia and met the Australian Premier, because the Chinese had a hand in this underground base. So we have a very interesting tripartite operation to tackle this underground base: United States of America, Australia and China. And do not think for 1 minute, please, that Chinese nationals are arriving, illegal immigrants, and they're bringing all these people in by aeroplane, and they're going to flood the country. That's not actually what's happening. There are aircraft landing from China, but they were bringing in some very specialized equipment, and I see this as a three-part way of dealing with something which Australia did not want to have to deal with on its own. So that's a very positive step. However, if things don't go the way I would like them to go in the United States, then you're going to have this kickback from the civilian side in the government, who will push for mandatory vaccinations for all Australians. So I hope that helps. Good question.
Okay, thank you. Sam, I think from the USA, says, Dear Simon and Becky, Rudolf Steiner described the human soul as residing within the body and acting as an interface to a subtler body known as spirit. Additionally, experiments in the early 1900s posited that the human soul has a mass of 21 grams. There's also a 2003 film, 21 grams, about this. Can a body as subtle as the soul have an actual physical mass? And if it does, if so, does it portal out at death to another dimension? Best wishes, Sam.
And Rudolf Steiner, this is the same guy that created the schools, the education system, because he wanted a different way for people to be. Anyone who studied esoteric or studied that will actually understand that the way we live today is not conducive to humankind. Surprising as it might be to governments around the world, the human beings are supposed to be happy. We're supposed to be happy and joyous and have a happy life. Now, there's probably a lot of governments that shake their head and go, we don't want our people. We want our people with their nose to the grindstone, work, 12 hours a day and, just struggle. And no, that's not what we were designed for. We were designed for happiness, actually, to love and enjoy things like trees and flowers and, the rain on your face, etc., etc. So, slightly different terminology. You must remember that this was, more than 100 years ago. And I think our understanding, our interpretation has changed. So for me, that there is a soul in the body and there's a physical body, but your higher self is what I would call spirit, right? So for me, the higher self, which is an energy overlay, it's you. But remember that many, many, many years ago, a reptilian force removed the key DNA strands from humanity, but they weren't, because of multiverse or universal law, they weren't allowed to take it and throw it in the trash can, so they separated it and put it out of phase. But it's there, and over those years it's been trying to get back into the body. There's the 12 strands of DNA. Remember, that's why you've got 12 months in a year, 12 on the clock, 12 inches to the foot. I know in decimal countries you don't have that, but we have these memories of why 12 is so important. So the 12 strands of DNA, 10 of them were removed energetically, left with 2 physical strands, which can be seen on an electron microscope. So humanity was intelligent enough to work, but not intelligent enough to break free from the prison that it had been placed in. So yes, 21 grams, there's a mass. If I take a piece of wood and I weigh that piece of wood, let's just say it's 1 pound. I'm going to use good old-fashioned imperial measurements. 1 pound. And I burn it completely through till it's smoke and dust and ashes. And I weigh my little pile of ashes and it's like half an ounce. Where's the rest of that material gone? Well, the reality is it's still there. It's either in the atmosphere or it's somewhere. It doesn't go. So the spirit, which I'm going to call the higher self, is a real reality. It's not a physical reality. It's a real reality within the dimension that it exists in. Therefore, it exerts a mass. Now, Steiner, like a couple of other guys, really, really clever, had a method to weigh it. I don't know whether it was 21 grams, but I know it will exert a weight. So, there were people who were ahead of their game. Hope that answers your question. Oh, no, you asked about where do you go? When your physical body dies, then the soul will leave your physical body. There's no question of that. Now, if the soul is really attached to the place it lives or a person, then it might not be able to go, and that's what we call a ghost, because it can't leave. But in most cases, 99.9% of the cases, it does leave, and then it wants to seek another physical body in which to incarnate in. So there we go. Thank you.
Thank you. I was thinking as well, how as well as our physical body, we have our etheric body, which is very, very close. It's about 1 millimeter outside, and that's our sort of spirit is connected with the etheric body, which does take the shape and form of our physical body. And my sort of thoughts and understandings, if people see a ghost, like soon after someone's passed, or if people would see the soul rising, often it takes the form of the etheric body peeling away from the physical body. Is it possible that it's the etheric body that weighs that 21 grams?
I can't answer that, but what I can tell you is that when somebody passes, it is the soul that goes.
Yeah.
The etheric body, you're absolutely right, will remain for a while with the body, because it is neither the physical body nor is it the soul. Now, you at home know that if you have an LED light on an electrical object, if you turn the power off, that LED light will still remain on for quite a while because of the residual current between the wall socket and that switch, and it will burn that power, which might be 5 seconds, 30 seconds, goodness knows not. But once all the power's been drawn, there's no more coming in, the LED light goes off, and you'll have seen that. And that's the same with the etheric body. And so it will still act and it will hold on to the physical body. Now, when people see a ghost or they see a person very soon after they've died, Becky's absolutely right. In many cases, it's the etheric body, because the etheric body is confused. It normally goes straight with the soul, but there are occasions when it is confused and can happen. But also the soul can choose to remain around, and that's also loosely we would call a ghost. So both of those actions are correct, except the etheric body can't last very long. Okay,
thank you. Right, the next question is from Susan in Sweden, who says, "Hi Simon and Becky, and thanks for all your work. I have been pondering a theme question for a while regarding Sweden. The more I learn, the more I come to view Sweden as a spider in the net, second to Schweiz, so that's Switzerland, always outside of war as a neutral country. My question, what is Sweden's real role in the world politics, if any? But to give some background to this question, let's look at Sweden. Historically, our first non-Swedish king, Bernadotte, was married to Desiree Clary, who had close ties to Napoleon Bonaparte. Bernadotte became king 1818 as the previous Swedish king adopted the French marshal 4 years earlier, who without any royal birth of his own became the ancestor of the current royal family. Why was he chosen instead of an existing family from a previous royal line? Was he only a puppet, or was there some unknown bloodlines involved, maybe through the wife? Today we have a global important industry on key positions with telecommunication like Ericsson, weapons industry, engineering like ABB, most connected to the investment company Investor, owned by Wallenberg, also a Bilderberg Group attendee, as well as the current king according to an insider. We also have different rules during this virus circus, not many restrictions compared to other countries, but also high number of deaths if one is to believe the numbers. And lastly, there seemed to be a huge influx of immigrants during the last 15 years to break our economy and society. So what is Sweden's real role in world politics, if any?
Right, thank you. Not quite right, because Sweden was subject to Nazi Germany control during the Second World War. Switzerland was not. So Switzerland is totally on its own. So many huge players have got their valuables stored in Switzerland that for many, many years it's been an unwritten rule that nobody goes and invades that country, because they've all got their assets there, and if they're all going to kill each other on Thursday but be best friends on Friday because it's all part of a great game, well, they don't want all their art treasures and gold and all the rest of it burnt or looted or destroyed. So they have agreed not to attack Switzerland. Sweden, of course, was very closely connected to Nazi Germany, and I'm sorry, many of you Swedes might not want to hear that, but I can give you the proof for that. One of the Messerschmitt group at the end of the Second World War went and was accepted by the Swedish government, and he took Nazi jet engine technology to Sweden, and in fact by 1947, that's 3 years, about 2.5 years actually, 2.5 years after the end of the Second World War, there were very, very few countries you can imagine who had jet fighter technology. Let's see if we can run it through here. So of course Great Britain, because Great Britain invented the jet engine in a sense that it could fly. The Germans actually got there first, not a surprise. The Germans were the first to make a jet engine, but the British were the first to stick it in an aeroplane and fly it. So the Germans had jet engines, the British, the Americans. The French actually got them later when a jet aircraft was smuggled into France. But Sweden, of all the strange countries, Sweden actually had one of the world's first viable jet fighters. And that's because one of the Messerschmitts actually was officially accepted. You know, you come here, you'll have protection, and you build us a jet fighter. And he went, and I think he worked for Saab. I think that's where he went and worked for Saab. And if you look at some of the Saab jet fighters, like the Darken, Saab Darken, a most bizarre shaped aircraft, and it has its roots back in the Nazi time. So what that tells us straight away is that Sweden has a very interesting connection to a part of the world that's hidden from ordinary people. You've answered your question. There are countries, doesn't matter how big or small they are, there are countries that align themselves with a particular faction, and when they do so, then they are subject to that faction's will. So that might be that, you know, we don't like this leader or we like that leader. So don't look on Sweden as the same as Switzerland. look on it more like Norway, because the people of Sweden are not unlike the Norwegians. They're like a nice clean country, have a good standard of living, childcare is pretty good, don't like this happening, don't like that happening, we're very quite insular. But, you know, we like a good lifestyle, and we like to go out and have a coffee and a rangy boom with our Dutch friends across the border. And so they are a country that thinks that they're fine and everything's good. But the reality is you do have some serious issues because of the people who are running that country. So a lot of the low countries, I'm using that term loosely, a lot of the low countries think they're off the radar, but actually they're not. They're absolutely on the radar. And you talked about Ericsson. Ericsson, competes with Motorola for military and non-military communications. Big investors, and you will find that the German connection throughout your corporations and your government, seen and unseen, is incredibly strong. And I give you the reasons right back to the Second World War for that. Good question. Don't often get asked about Sweden, and happy to answer that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is from Brittany, who is our New York coordinator.
Oh, great.
And Brittany says, "Hi from New York, Simon and Becky. Thank you both for everything. Truly, you have changed our lives for the better, which is lovely. I am posting this question for one of our New York members because I would also like to know, what is Simon's own prediction, if he has one, on how the truth will ultimately be disclosed to the masses? We have heard Corey Goode say that intelligence has gone quiet for several reasons, and there were some plans on how it would all be revealed, but none of those secret plans have come to fruition. We so value your intuition and are just curious. What is your personal prediction of how the next phase of disclosure should come about? All the best, Brittany and Ron." Now, someone has responded to that because, of course, this is all open to members, so some other members comment. And a member called Michael has said, "Hi, Brittany. David Wilcock is planning to address his predictions on a video this weekend, so keep an eye out."
Well, I've got a lot. Well, first of all, thank you to New York. Thank you. I got a lot of respect for David. So that would be worth listening to. It's not so much about going quiet. There are so many other things that are taking centre stage that the focus hasn't been so much on that. It's been worked on in the background, and David perhaps will talk about that a little bit, in the sense that it's been on the back boiler and coming forward. When you say disclosure, I'm presuming you mean alien disclosure, or are you referring to everything?
Well, Brittany doesn't say, but that's the thing. There's the whole alien disclosure.
Normally when we talk about disclosure, we talk about aliens.
Donald Trump did allude to that, though, didn't he? Quite strongly a few weeks ago when he had his interview with his son. I think it was around Father's Day for a USA.
It was Father's Day, and he was talking about Roswell. And Don Trump Jr. actually said to his father, "Are you going to disclose what's happening in Roswell?" And President Trump said, "There's a lot of people who know some very interesting stuff in Roswell." Then he said, "Well," he said to his son, "I'll have to think about it. I'll have to think about that. But there's a lot of interesting stuff." It's the first president who, when asked about Roswell, didn't throw his hands up in the air and say, "Don't waste my time, kid stuff." The first president who's actually turned around and said, "Yeah, there's a lot going on. A lot of people know stuff about it. Big deal, but I'm not sure." The full answer to your question is it really depends who wins on November the 3rd. One of the key aspects for Trump announcing the Space Force was so that he could disclose. You guys, coordinators throughout the world, and many of the listeners, Becky and I and all the others, we just say, right, tell us, tell the world, But they're not going to do that. They just aren't going to do it. They want to do it slowly. And the best way to do disclosure is to begin to talk about the Space Force, and to do a tour of what it can do, and talk about what its job is. And that's the gentle way that disclosure will come in. Now, I have said, and I'll stand by what I've said because it's truth, that certain off-planet entities, benign human type entities, have made a number of demands now to governments to basically tell the truth and disclose. Now, when President Trump took over, they backed off because they felt that President Trump was fighting for survival and fighting for the human race. And although it was really good and lofty to talk about aliens, the reality was that people were trying to poison him and poison the First Lady and all the rest of it. And really and truly, he needed more support and help in those fields. And certainly, children in underground bases were a priority, not somebody disclosing there's aliens. Because at the moment, if anybody was to say there were aliens on a public format, the system would absolutely come down on them like a ton of bricks, and it just would be worthless. And so the only time you can have a disclosure is when the world's media is more balanced and is not controlled by the same people who frankly would like us all up against a wall and shot. So you can't have disclosure while you've got these huge control on social media and on the established media. It's not going to happen. So my answer to you is, it depends on November the 3rd who wins the election. But don't expect a full and utter disclosure overnight. Expect a gentle disclosure. And those people who say that the spaceships are going to come down and they're going to do an Independence Day type thing, they're going to sit over the cities, it's not going to happen, because the entities from the fifth dimension, Palladians, Andromedans, and many others, really do get it. They get the human psyche, and they know full well that if they did that, yes, it would force governments to be truthful in the sense that there were aliens. But there's no guarantee that a government would say, oh yes, this is our friends, we've been chatting to them for 50 years. Some governments would say, alien invasion, we are being invaded, launch nuclear weapons against the spaceships. So far from empowering humanity, lifting humanity out of the hidden control system, it would plunge humanity into a war. That's the reality. That's why they haven't done it. That's why anybody telling you spaceships are going to come down, forget it. Because thank goodness the people behind these alien craft and the people making the decisions are more intelligent than we are. And they know that whilst there's a great call for we want the truth, if it was coming from them rather than our own governments, it would end badly. So a disclosure must come from our own government, but it can only do so when the enemy, these are the people who like to thin the population by 3/4, who don't want to give you the truth. They make my life difficult. I'm sure they make David's life difficult. Anybody and anyone who's spiritual on the planet, you have a difficult life. You don't have to have a radio show to have a difficult life. You just have to be a good person. If you're a good person, you get a hard life. That's the point here. And so until that element of control has been basically cleaned up, there cannot be a disclosure, because it won't get anywhere. If President Trump comes out and says something, about the only channel that will cover it truthfully is Fox News. Every other major television and radio organization on the planet will either not cover it or take it out of context. Now, who's going to stand up and say they're aliens? I have, and many other people have, but we're not part of the chain of command. We're not in government. We're not the person at the BBC or the CNN or anything else. And so until that side of our life can be cleared up, there will be no disclosure, because the other side, the bad side, don't want it, because disclosure is another removal of their control. And that's why it's not being forced on us, because it could lead to a war, not between us and the aliens, because the aliens would not retaliate, but the way that it would be manipulated and used as an alien invasion, and then that's it. Because in 50 years' time, if the aliens come back, it would be seen as another invasion. So it has to be played incredibly carefully, and everything depends on November the 3rd. That's my answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the hour is almost running up.
I think we need to go on.
Yeah, I've got a few questions on interdimensionals and extraterrestrials.
I'm happy
if you
to
could answer them fairly quickly.
I'm happy to take that. But
and then I'll do the final question. I've been scrolling through, and I think I'm going to have to paraphrase of the final question, which will cover quite a lot of people's questions.
Okay, all right. Let's just do some of this stuff and then.
Right. First of all, so Jamie in Australia says, I have two questions. One, could you give me a well-rounded explanation on what exactly the jinn are, such as their origins, why they are the way they are, and their intention on this planet? Two, do the reptilians work with the jinn? So what exactly are jinn, and do reptilians work with them?
I can give you a very well-rounded answer to that. If you would like to go onto YouTube, about 5, 6, 7 years ago, I did a conference, and I talked for an hour and a half on the jinn, and you will find genuine, real photographs of jinn that were captured. Some are 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, which I was very lucky to obtain, and many are drawings that children have done that I was able to put up, and adults have done. I had a big talk on that, and I covered it in a way that nobody in the Western world had covered it. If you can find that conference that I did, you will find information and detail in there greater than any other non-Muslim commentator.
Can I just kick in here?
Yeah.
I think, if I'm correct in remembering, that it might be the one that you did in the Blackpool
I don't know where it
talk,
was.
and it was the one entitled Aliens, What They Don't Want You to Know, and that's the one that was incredibly popular. It went over a million
I don't know if it is
viewers.
that one. I don't know if it is that one. I don't know. Okay, well
I think it might be that one.
If it is, I'm not sure. But there was one called Aliens, What They Don't Want You to Know, and it nearly hit 1 million views, which for a British person in our topic is unknown, unheard of. And then the next thing, YouTube reduced it to something like 20,000, because they don't like the fact that a secret topic was getting so much aired. And we know that. I'm not a big person into these numbers. It doesn't mean that much to me. But it was the guy who ran the venue, and I think I've talked about it before. He said, "Oh, you're on 900,000. You nearly make the million, you know." And then 4 months later, I contacted him. It could be Blackpool, and I said, "Did it ever make the million?" He said, "Oh, I'll have a look." And then he said, "Oh no," he said, "YouTube have knocked it down to 20,000 or 25,000." I was absolutely shocked, and he said, "Well, they do that, you know. They don't want, you know, they don't want that confidence. They don't want that support. In other words, somebody's getting that number of hits or that number of views. It begins to challenge the establishment, so they just knock it." But it might be that. But if you were to type in Simon Parkes and shadow beings, or Simon Parkes and jinn, you know, it was a good few years ago now, 5, 6, 7 years ago. Well, that's that one. The reptilian one, you said, do they work with them? yes is the answer, but not particularly well, because of the connection between them. They partially exist in the same reality, lower fourth, partially. Jinn are not technically in the lower fourth. There is some connection, but it's more to do with the fact that there is a reptilian type, I can't say DNA, I can't say that, but some form of genetic connection that exists. That is why on cathedrals, on churches, these gargoyle type things, which are actually representations of jinn, look scaly, and they look like they're sort of a cross between a dragon and a human, and that is what they're trying to represent. So rather than rehash loads of stuff, go and find that YouTube video, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you for your question.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so that's quite good. Let's see what the final. Did you say some more alien questions?
I've got another alien question before I ask the last topic. So, Faye from the UK says, "Hi Simon and Becky, I would like to know more about different races of beings. Simon, you have previously mentioned how you have had your soul taken from your body and placed into that of a mantid body, and have provided us with an interesting experience of what that was like. You've also mentioned that mantids, like some other beings, are of hive mind. Could you please talk more about being in a mantid body and experiencing that hive mind connection? How does it feel to be part of that hive mind, and how is your experience and thoughts connected and shared between the individuals of that race? Also, as previously mentioned, these beings wish to evolve. When they do so, will that change for them? Will they still be a race that is hive connected, or are they to evolve from this, becoming more like other non-hive races?"
Okay.
Very interesting question.
It is, but unfortunately in the New Age, this concept of hive mind has been somewhat hijacked, and it's become synonymous with evil. The reality is that at some point in the future, the human race will become telepathic, which is a hive mind. Now, the word hive mind we use in a negative context because of the way bees are. We see bees, and they have the drone workers and then the royals, and it's a hive mind is a hive. It's very negative. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is being telepathic. All alien creatures from the fourth dimension upwards are telepathic, and we've yet on a blanket to receive that. As we evolve up through the fourth and the fifth dimension, we as a human race will get that. But that doesn't make us hive-minded. What it means is that we have the ability to know if you're lying to me. We have the ability to see things that we won't be able to see. Now, does that make us hive mind? No, it doesn't, because it doesn't mean that we're all going to walk down the road together and dig a hole and then go along and then fill it up again. Being in a mantid body, and I only shared one or two experiences with the audience. There were many experiences I had, and I wasn't prepared to discuss that because I thought that it was too challenging to the audience. You please must try to understand that I have only shared a very small amount of my experiences with you, because some of them are so fundamentally challenging to the values that we hold that I didn't imagine that many people would be able to grasp it and understand it and take it for what it was. Being in a non-human body, I can't give it to you in the way you want, because the soul in my body is not 100% mantid. Now, if you put 100% mantid soul in a 100% mantid body, you will get what you're talking about, a hive mind. But there's only 1/3 of me that's of that particular race or cultural group. And so when I went into that physical body, I didn't I was individual. That's the point. I was an individual within a group. So was I aware of them? No, I wasn't, because I had free will to shut that out from my mind. So I had enhanced psychic capabilities, but for free will choice, I didn't want them in my mind. So I had the best of both worlds, really, if you like. And I was able to appreciate and understand what they were doing on the earth, what the role was, the technologies that they had, and the effects that they were having and had on the earth. So that was, I had about, that I can remember, between 5 and 7 experiences of that I've recorded and written down. The process in and out of the body is not quick, and does require some advanced technologies which are on the earth but in very limited locations. So I suppose my key here is to say to you that the word hive mind is used by commentators who want to give you a fear-based label. If you put somebody into any body, physical body, and that person has free will, they do not become hive mind. Okay, reptilians are hugely psychic, and they're not hive-minded, but they choose to take orders and they choose to be part of an interface. They could choose not to do that, but they've accepted the culture and the way of it. So they still have independence. Remember that any living creature with a soul, has free will. It's created by God. That's bottom line here. And the only thing that's not will be artificially created grey entities. Many of those male entities don't require a soul. They're not true clones, but that's a word we could use. Now, they don't have free will because they don't contain a soul. Those are the only true aliens with a hive mind, because without that they're lost, because they have no their mission for living is only to receive information. They receive information, therefore they act on that information. They can't create. But every other alien creature has a soul in it that I've met, and therefore they're not hive-minded. So we need to be perhaps more accurate to say that the only alien creatures that I have come across that are hive-minded are artificially created life forms that don't contain a soul. I hope that's a helpful answer, and thank you for it.
Okay, thank you. I've got one more question before I ask the final one.
Go on.
It's quite a big one, and it's got some photographs which I think
I haven't seen.
Ask. Okay, can I just show these?
No, it's fine. Just do it. That's fine. Just get Andy to put them up, but just read the question.
All right. Okay. From Michael in Florida, USA. Greetings, Simon and Becky. I have been listening to the podcast since 2016 and extend my profound gratitude for all the work you've done and continue to do for the betterment of humanity. Love you both. Oh, that's nice. My question is in regards to my first conscious astral projection experience that took place in the early 1990s. I was having a dream about arriving home from a night out. I was walking across my front lawn towards my home's front door when encountering a Weimaraner puppy.
Sorry, what puppy?
It's a little, sort of a nice grey, short-haired dog. They're very sleek looking, a Weimaraner, and they often have pale eyes. No, Weimaraner is a very specific type of breed. Absolutely beautiful dogs. I know what they are.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't, but go on anyway.
Okay. This one had glowing red eyes. Once I made eye contact with the puppy, I immediately found myself in my bedroom floating out of my body.
Yeah.
When doing so, I saw two beings at the foot of my bed observing me as this happened. When I realised that I was indeed out of my body having an astral projection experience, I panicked, both because of the beings and because I was not able to control my astral body. I was experiencing sleep paralysis simultaneously and couldn't move my physical body either. I felt that the beings were merely observing, but I did not get a good feeling from them. Maybe the whole experience was just overwhelming. The beings were large, about 8 foot tall, black 3D geometrically rectangular shaped, with broad shoulders tapering and narrowing down towards where the feet would be, square heads with square grey eyes. They both were leaning in towards me as I was rising out of my body. That might actually explain their shape as well. They remind me of the petroglyph images found in Utah. See attached image. At the time of the experience, I was unaware of the petroglyphs and only discovered their existence much later in life. Are you familiar with these beings, or have you had experiences with them? Do you know their origins or purpose here, and possibly why they were observing me? Thank you and much love.
Okay, great. If you've got some drawings, put them on. Get Andy to put them up for us. Okay. If anybody ever meets anything with red eyes, run a million miles. The red-eyed beings are perhaps the most sinister and the most unhelpful beings. It wasn't a real dog. It was an entity coming to you in the shape of a dog. The red eyes give it away. I've met an entity that was dressed in a monk's, traditionally called a monk's habit, but a monk's robe with a hood up, and it had red glowing eyes, but its head was a complete skull, just a skull, no flesh, no hair, nothing, just a skull and the red eyes. They're not particularly nice, so I would suggest that if anybody comes across something like that, you just get the heck out of there quickly. What you're describing is almost robotic-like. These are projections of entities that don't breathe oxygen and therefore cannot come in their own form but project across. So they are under the label of Men in Black. Your vision of a man in black is a guy in a 6 foot tall plus in a fedora hat, sunglasses, black tie, white shirt, black suit, black trousers, black shoes. You'd be absolutely correct. But that is one aspect of what we more correctly call enforcement. Okay? Men in Black is the label you all are familiar with. It's not the right label. It's not what they call themselves. They call themselves enforcement. But what you're describing to me are objects that look like gravestones, actually, although they have a kink in the top so that their shoulders are a bit different. They're not actually living creatures. They are projections that can operate. They could operate, in the gases of Saturn or Jupiter. They could operate in a vacuum. They are not reliant on an atmosphere at all. They are incredibly psychic. When they were leaning in towards you, they'd taken control of you, basically, and they were levitating you and doing stuff. Or what would be more interesting is to find out why were they after you? What was it about you? Because there'll be something interesting to them. We can find out what's going on, then we can understand a lot more about it. The entities you've described, very few people see them. They are without a soul. We're talking about that. They are probably got a masculine feel to them, but they don't give off any emotions because they can't. They're just not there. So they are designed to operate. They are designed to operate at a distance from the controller. There isn't a person inside. There isn't a person sitting inside. It's not a big suit they're operating at. But they are very psychic, and they're used for psychic work. So yeah, it would be worth a while when we get the books back open again, fingers crossed. Try and get in there. I'd love to have a chat with you. Meantime, I guess you've sent me the pictures. I guess you don't mind us putting them out. We'll make sure your name is not there. Don't want anyone to be able to associate those drawings with you. But let's put them out there. People can see what we've referred to and understand it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right. I'm going to paraphrase the last question because a lot of people have been asking in the last few weeks. Can you tell us more about the topics that the two Charlies, and now this is Charlie Ward, who's English, and Charlie Freak, who I think lives in Mexico, both are often seen being interviewed by either at the same time or by people. They're doing the rounds, so Magenta Pixies interviewed them.
I think John Mappin did one, didn't
John
it?
Mappin's interviewed them.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
And Sacha Stone. So they are talking about the old financial system stopping and a new one, which is a quantum one, coming in its place, and the fact that the Bank of England is apparently closed this week. Please, can you tell us more about the financial system that they are talking about?
Okay. I was going to do this as an update, and then Becky had said, "Oh, we've got a question on this." Well, there's several questions.
There are several, and I can't find the exact full one, so I've sort of amalgamated them to include.
Well, that's fine. I think people would just be glad that their question got recognition, and we're doing it. Think back, those of you who've, long in the tooth, to the time when we were told there would be a reset. And there was talk about every man, woman and child would get the equivalent of $10,000 from all the money that had been looted off people, pension funds and multi-corporations and stealing from governments, all the rest of it. Well, that sort of died a death. And those of you who got access to going back over my podcasts or my talks over a number of years will know that I said that was highly unlikely. Because and I've always called it King Solomon's gold. This is gold predominantly and money that had been hidden in Korea and Vietnam and a number of other places. There's huge resources. The Chinese are very, very connected with it. And I said that that's not really a very good way of dealing with it, because if you give $10,000 to everybody, you can't change your life with that. Some people could say they could go and drink themselves silly, or buy whatever they want, and that might change their life. But I know from a spiritual point of view, it's not likely to perhaps do that. $1 million might change your life, but 10,000 perhaps isn't going to change it. And I said it was much more likely that organizations that were not part of the government, that weren't even a charity, that were also part of the government, these charities, many of them, I'm afraid to tell you, are just money-making machines. They're just machines to take money off kind people and create something. I'll give you an example. There are lots of charities that are around to cure cancer. Well, you and I know that there are cures for cancer already, both in the real world and in the hidden world. But if a cure for cancer was announced, what's going to happen to all the charities that have an empire built on donations, trusts and bequeathments, right down to rattling a tin on the sidewalk, please put some money in this. And we all know someone who's died of cancer, so we give to that. And I really have a great respect for Macmillan nurses. For me, that's actually a good use of the money. These predominantly women, but not exclusively so, nurses who work with people in the last stages of dying of cancer. These are wonderful people, and they deserve what they get, and they deserve more. But there's a chief executive, there's an assistant chief executive, there's a corporate manager, there's an accountant, there's this, you know exactly what I mean. There's a pyramid of corporate delivering something which I think you, the audience, could deliver at a quarter of the price. And so if there was to be a redistribution of monies that had been stolen from people for goodness knows how long, then it'd better go to organisations that are not going to go and give it all back to the government, not even well-known charities whose name is well known in every household in many countries, who would just be more of the same. They need to find individuals or organisations that are not part of this damn structure of greed and empower them to push their visions forward and to bring help to other people. So service to others, not service to yourself. Now, I said that years ago. Now, there are two societies in China that are very powerful. One is the Red Dragons and the White Dragons. And both of those dragon societies actually were pushing this idea well before it became flavour of the month amongst the West. The One Dragon Society wanted to do it but wanted to charge an interest rate, and the other Dragon Society wanted to give it away and have some sort of return but was less banking. What we really need is an empowerment for good decent organisations or individuals, and to be told, this is what we like you to spend it on, but we don't want it back. Right. You can't do that at the moment because of the control system. Right, those of you who've been eagerly watching the news, you'll know that President Trump did something very clever with the Fed, and the Federal Reserve Bank is now subject to government, and ultimately actually to the President of the United States through a chain of command. This is a very, very big move which was not flagged up by the established media because they didn't want people to understand what had occurred, because if people who were asleep understood what had happened, then they would begin to question what the system was. You see, we came off the gold standard, which allowed these unscrupulous people to create money, first of all in paper and then electronically, with no connection to the value of the country. Now, in 1918, the First War ended, and Germany was almost bankrupt. So was Great Britain, actually, but Germany far worse. And what happened was that the Western powers came after Germany to such an extent that the Germans decided to create a destruction of their economy to get the French, particularly the French, to a lesser extent the British, off their back. So what the Germans did was they absolutely printed inflation money, and I made a study of it, and I've got a good collection of these crazy inflation notes. You imagine in 1923, in November 1923, you went in to a shop to buy, for those people who eat meat, a German sausage called a Wurst, and it was equivalent to 1 billion German marks. 1 billion. Can you imagine in the United States or Great Britain or in a European country going in with a $1 billion pound or euro banknote, 1 billion, and getting a sausage, which might just, keep you going for one day. So what happened was that countries realized that they had this wonderful ability to create a fictitious money over and above the worth of their country, and this absolutely brought about destruction. So very interestingly, what the Germans did was they changed to what they call the Rentenmark, and they valued their country on all the corn, the maize, the wheat, how many tractors they had, how many government buildings they had, how many facilities they had, how many mines, what was the gold, the silver, the copper, and they added all that up, and they said that is the net worth of Germany in 1918, 1919, 1920. They worked it all out for 4 or 5 years. And so they created a currency based on that. Now, in effect, that's what the gold standard was, because it said this is the amount of gold we hold in the bank. We will not produce more negotiable bonds or money more than we have gold. Well, people like the Rothschilds, who are not the top of the tree, remember, they're just managers but they're very knowledgeable managers. And they looked at it and they said, we're constrained. We're constrained by the amount of money, and also we've got oversight. The bank has oversight over what we're doing, and we can't be having that. So the Federal Reserve was created. You know the story of the Titanic, its sister ship being sunk, and a number of people who died on that boat who were against coming off the gold reserve. If you haven't researched it, please do so. Therefore, there was an important meeting not long after the Titanic supposedly sank, and it was pushed through. America came off the gold standard, and lo and behold, they could print as much money as they wanted paper-wise with no recourse back to the government. And that's more complicated than that. They sell the bonds and the money back to the government. Won't get into that at the moment. So what Trump has been doing, originally 4 or 5 years ago, I said there wasn't enough gold in America, therefore it would have to be a silver standard. And ultimately, hey, you had the silver dollar back in the 1880s, 1870s, 80s and 90s. So that's a precedent for it. Trump's done remarkably well. There is now enough gold in America to balance a currency. He's done remarkably well. It's incredible. I'd always thought that he'd have to have a mixture of gold, silver, platinum and palladium. That's not to say that those other metals won't come in, and I do believe there will be gold, silver, platinum and palladium will make the holding of the precious metal standard. But we're talking also about quantum. The whole point is about taking the people's fingers off the control. People who've run the money of the world for so long. Because I know that there's been a lot of talk about it, but no one's actually said how it will work. What the effect will be when that subject comes around. People suddenly don't seem to have the answer for that. The first and foremost of this is to remove those people who have manipulated our lives through the banking system. So by making it quantum and by backing it in the first phase of the operation, because it's a multi-phase rollout, the first phase of the operation to a precious metal standard gives confidence to corporations, because corporations are going to have to survive, so are companies and individuals. It gives confidence in the banking world, but it at a stroke removes the old players from the game. Now, in terms of, we understand Bitcoin, a form of electronic currency which again is controlled by government and not by a third party. That's the next phase that will go through that. The difficulty has been the policing of it, the encryption of it, the controlling of it. And I had a very good presentation given to me which explained that the amount of energy required to control it, change logarithms, made it's not viable for a worldwide currency. But quantum is a very exciting way of instant connection to the resources that you hold. So if I've got 10 carrots and I dice my carrots up into little coin shaped pieces, then I will always have 10 carrots. I can't make 11 carrots unless I find more resources. Once we've removed the hands of the very evil people, then there is more flexibility. Okay, so I don't envisage people receiving a check for so many dollars and told, this is payback. I do envisage a system that organizations with a track record of not being controlled by government will be supported in one shape or another, and those projects are brought in to help humanity. And there's going to be a lot of people that say, yes please, I want $10,000. And maybe in some cases that will be the case if there's a hardship case, or particularly in children's where there are very serious cases. Certainly all these children that have been held under underground bases, that they need to receive cash money for life. Absolutely, I have no question about that. Those people who've been tortured or held like that, they need to be the first in line. So there is a change coming. When will it happen? Depends what happens on November the 3rd. If November the 3rd goes the way I want it to go, you won't find countries forcing vaccinations. If it doesn't go that way, you're going to find many countries forcing vaccinations. If it goes the way I want it to go, then you will find a full change to the way that we understand our banking system to operate, and the household names that have held on for dear life will no longer be hanging on for dear life. But if November the 3rd doesn't go that way, it'll be more of the same. We'll be back to what we were, a fiat paper system. So that's why November the 3rd is not just about, do you vote for a donkey or do you vote for an elephant? November the 3rd is the most important election in the United States and for the world that humanity has ever faced. And those of you who've been very loyal and listened to me for many years will know that I've said to you and to myself, England, Great Britain, is the place of the energy. The United States is the battle. And that's exactly what is being played out. Britain is the home of the energy, the psychic power, the connection to the earth. The United States is where the fight that this will be expressed will come out. And so it really is the most important election in our lifetimes. And those people of you who are 100 years old, well done. This is the most important election because it will decide where the human race is going to go. It's not just about America, because every other country is looking and they will take their lead from the way it goes. And that is why the world's media is totally against President Trump, because the world's media are controlled by the same people that print your money. And if President Trump is saying, we want to change, no wonder they want to get rid of Trump. So, I'm not an American citizen. If I was an American citizen, I would certainly vote for President Trump. Of course I would. Because I understand the greater picture. And I know that those of you who listen to my show and many other shows, you also get the greater picture. The problem that we are faced with is that so many people just listen to mainstream news because they don't understand there are underground bases where children are being murdered. They don't understand that their governments are only interested in squeezing everything out of them. They don't understand that the doctor is a salesman for the pharmaceutical companies. They don't understand that when they go to court, the court is not there to protect them. The court is there to fight to protect the system. They don't understand that when they go to university, they're actually being taught what the system wants them to know, not the truth. Now, how do you overturn that level of control? Where do you start? So you can't go talking about aliens when a fundamental person is at the fundamental level of, I've got to put a mask on my face when I'm in my car on my own because, the virus might be sucked in through the air conditioning and it'll get me. You can't talk about spaceships and aliens when so many people are at this low level of education. We have to educate people. We have to start at a level at which we can engage with them. And I had a discussion with someone the other day and I said, people who say, don't believe in aliens, don't believe in flying saucers. And I say to them, do you believe in God? Oh yes, I believe in God. Well, you can't touch God. You can't see God. So why do you believe in God? Oh, because of the Bible. Right, so there's a book that you've read and you believe in God. The reason the people believe in God from the paper point of view is because the government says that's okay. You can't see God, you can't communicate with God, generally speaking, you can't touch him, but that's okay because the government and the established churches are hand in glove working together. And so that's okay, that's allowed. But spaceships, flying saucers, that's a secret. You're not allowed to know that, so we won't allow you to have that. So start with people by saying, what's the difference? You can't see God, you can't touch God, but you believe in that. And once we've educated people beyond this very low basic level, God bless them, that most of them are at, then we can begin to explain some of this other stuff. And that's why President Trump is having to do what he does because he could sit down and have a 14-hour conference with unawake and unaware people answering every question they gave him, and they'd walk out after 14 hours scratching their head and say, what was he talking about? Because you have to overcome hundreds of years of conditioning. And that's why everybody who's listening to my show today, who've broken free from the control, you did it. You broke free from that. And that's what we've got to do for these people. Because if we don't, then there's going to be a very small band of us, and we will have failed actually in bringing this other group across. But whilst the mainstream media fight against us, whilst they push their point of view, we are a small voice. And so the way that President Trump... What's that dog doing?
He's playing with that.
The dog's got a toy. Not a cat this time.
And she's been chewing the leads as well, so I've lifted them up. I hope
We're
they're
nearly
not crackly.
finished. We're nearly finished. So basically, what I'm saying is that whilst we're all doing what the dog is doing, which is chomping at the bit, want to get going, we have to understand that the vast majority of the human race is very, very dumbed down. And I'm frustrated by it, just as you're frustrated by it. But we have to work at the speed which we will be accepted at, not which will be rejected at. Okay, so listen, thank you very much indeed. The dog clearly wants to go out for a walk. I'm very grateful to you. I'm very grateful for you for being here at this time and keeping strong and not being pushed around. And just hang in there, because things are going to get better. They really are. Thank you. God bless.